The thing they were asked to do as interns was tabulate, complex, essentially what spreadsheets now do, sort of complex kind of deals and what happens if the interest rate changes and so on. And that's what they would spend 18-hour days working on. By the 1990s, Microsoft spreadsheets and Excel was out, and so that was no longer needed. No, you didn't need to calculate that yourself. You just changed a cell in a spreadsheet, and it all kind of cascaded through. Well, guess what? Interns at investment banks, at Goldman Sachs, whatever, were still working 18-hour days,
Hmm.
and there was just as many of them. They were just doing something else. Although AI obviously is incredibly new and scary to lots of people, the kind of story of automation has been happening for at least 200 years. Railways, motor cars, obviously robots in factories, mechanization. And the thing is, I think what's sort of interesting is that if you'd have asked someone in the year 1800 who was worried about kind of the Industrial Revolution and traditional jobs in agriculture being lost, if you'd have asked them to, what the future's going to look like, they would have focused on the jobs that were going away, and that's totally understandable. That's a way of life and so on. But it would have been very hard for them to, guess that, by the year 1900, 100 years later, there'd be hundreds of thousands of British people employed on the railways and as gaslighters in cities. And similarly, in the year 1900, people worried about, mechanization and automation, couldn't have predicted that by the year 2000, huge numbers of people would be employed as HR professionals and IT managers. And so I guess the point is that however turbulent these times are, and they're understandably scary and worrying for people, humans have an incredible capacity to come up with new needs and new desires and experiences. And it doesn't lessen in any way how difficult those transitions are. But I think we should have confidence based on the last 200 years that, there will continue to be new jobs. They just won't be the same as the old ones. It's not clear yet, to be honest, how AI is reshaping kind of jobs in real time. So there was some data that the Times reported on earlier this week, which suggested that entry-level jobs in the UK, graduate jobs, have dropped by about 30% since ChatGPT in 2022. Now, I would say that may well be correlation, not causation. In Australia, by contrast, just this week, data came out looking at law firms and their recruitment of graduates, entry-level law jobs. And in Australia, the recruitment is at record levels. So it may well be that pretty scary data in the UK maybe says more about the UK than it does about AI, and says more about, Rachel Reeves' tax on jobs than it does about AI. But then again, there's a thing in tech called Amara's law, which is that we tend to, we humans tend to overestimate the impact of a new technology in the short term, but actually underestimate the impact in the long term. And so, it may well be the case that AI is not having that big an impact on actual jobs and job availability today, but it obviously will have a dramatic effect over the next 10 years, 15 years. I think we do have longer than 18 months, to be honest, but we almost certainly don't have 18 years not to, change is coming. That's for sure. There's this beautiful concept, I think, called Moravec's paradox, and which sounds sort of wanky and pretentious, I know, but it's a really nice idea. And the idea is that the stuff that computers, AI, finds sort of easy to do, are the things that humans sort of find really hard, and the things that it's really hard to teach a robot are the things that humans find easier. And the reason for that, I think, so if you think about like maths, right? If I ask you to times, multiply 999 by 999, you might struggle. Well, you're cleverer than me, you might be fine, but most people would struggle. Whereas computers have been able to do that for, 70 years. And why is it that that's sort of been an easy thing to teach a computer and it's a hard thing for humans? Well, advanced mathematics is a relatively new, recent thing in the span of human evolution. And so these are hard. That's why you've got to study for a long time to be a great mathematician, or, and so on. Whereas the things that we evolved over, hundreds of thousands, millions of years doing, things to do with empathy, and sort of interpersonal skills, they're incredibly hard to teach computers to do. And so there is a kind of view by people, far brainier than me, people like Tyler Cowen, the American economist, Reid Hoffman, the founder of LinkedIn. They think that, jobs involving kind of empathy and interpersonal skills will, be a real kind of growth area because, humans, it's much more resilient to automation than lots of other jobs. And then the other area, and this is maybe you know, the Times writer Phil Collins used to tell me often that I used to fail the "Does my mum know this already?" test, and this might fail that, Hugo. But the likes of Reid Hoffman make the argument that jobs that involve working with AI and being able to do more with AI rather than kind of trying to compete with it and lose out to it, is going to be a really important area. So, a good example there, I think, is in the field of kind of medicine, where, AI being used to kind of triage patients, to do the first, have a first crack at kind of diagnostics, but obviously a human would then double check and do the kind of really important, human relation, bedside manner side of medicine, which is, by the way, incredibly important and material to outcomes. So I think that is a decent bet. The economist I most respect on this, Tyler Cowen, an American economist, wrote a great book called Average is Over, because he felt that AI will drive a kind of greater disparity of income, sort of hollow out a bunch of, existing white collar jobs. But as you say, Hugo, sort of incomes at the top, and not just for people who are lucky enough to have, built ChatGPT, but actually, if you're a senior partner at a law firm, it may well be in the future that you need fewer lawyers beneath you checking documents and so on, because that can be handled by the AI, much like it's currently, a lot of that's being outsourced to countries like India. But and so if you're at the top of a law firm, you might need fewer people, but you're probably not going to charge your clients any less. So your profits may well go way up, or your personal earnings may go way up. One real clue, Hugo, I don't know if you've seen this, but just in the last few days, more and more is coming out about Mark Zuckerberg, founder of Facebook, now called Meta. He's been on a recruitment spree trying to recruit the best AI engineers, and their salaries packages are absolutely astronomical. So the latest reporting is $300 million US over 4 years for the top each of the top AI scientists that he's recruiting.
Yeah.
So if you think about investment banking interns in the 1970s, right? Well, the thing they were asked to do as interns was tabulate, complex, essentially what spreadsheets now do, sort of complex kind of deals and what happens if the interest rate changes and so on. And that's what they would spend 18-hour days working on. By the 1990s, Microsoft spreadsheets and Excel was out, and so that was no longer needed. No, you didn't need to calculate that yourself. You just changed a cell in a spreadsheet, and it all kind of cascaded through. Well, guess what? Interns at investment banks, at Goldman Sachs, whatever, were still working 18-hour days, and there was just as many of them. They were just doing something else. And as I say, the evidence in Australia this week is that the big law firms are hiring more graduates than ever, even though they're using AI in lots of new ways. So, the big part of the reason you hire entry level people is not so much for the work they do today, which, having been an entry level person for much of my life, I feel you're not that useful when you're still learning. But you're recruited really because they hope that one day you'll be really helpful to the company, and they've got to train
Yeah.
you. I don't think that
Sure.
need change all that much. I really worry, actually. I think the UK, the numbers in the UK around sort of graduate jobs, sadly, I think reflects, how weak the British economy is. But when you layer AI onto that over the next few years, I think it is potentially going to be a really tough time for people.